Once upon a time, in the bluest heart of the sea, there stood a silver palace with windows like shells and halls lit by jellyfish lanterns. There lived the Sea King, who was kind but quiet, and his mother, a clever old queen who kept everything running like the tide. She raised his 6 daughters, mermaid princesses, born 1 year apart. The youngest was the most curious of all. She wore no pearls, only a crown of fresh white lilies that glowed softly in the water, as if each petal held a secret wish. While her sisters collected treasures and sang with dolphins, the Little Mermaid grew still and thoughtful in her garden of red flowers. She listened to the faraway rumble of ships, the sighs of wind above the waves, and she wondered what it would be like to walk on land with a beating heart and an everlasting soul. "You poor child," her grandmother would say, patting her hand with a sea-soft wrinkle. "We live longer than humans, 300 years no less. True, we become sea foam at the end, bright and brief as morning bubbles, but humans are so fragile." "They have souls that go on forever," the Little Mermaid whispered. "I would trade all my years for a single human day if it meant gaining an immortal soul." When a mermaid turned 15, she was allowed to rise to the surface. Each year, 1 sister went. The eldest returned with eyes full of moonlight and tales of ships like floating castles. The next brought stories of fields of yellow flowers and villages that smelled of warm bread. Another described icebergs that glittered like diamonds and sang when they cracked. The Little Mermaid listened, her heart growing and stretching like a sail in the wind. At last her turn came. On her 15th birthday, she rose at twilight through water as clear as crystal. The sea opened into a sky scattered with stars, and a ship floated nearby, strung with lanterns as bright as a constellation. Music spilled over the railings, laughter tumbled into the night. She swam closer, peeking through a window. Inside stood a young prince with kind eyes and a smile that felt like sunshine. It was his birthday, too. Sailors cheered him, fiddles danced, and fireworks painted the sky. The Little Mermaid hovered among the waves, listening, her cheeks glowing like pearls. Then the wind twisted, clouds piled up, the sea grew dark and heavy. A storm roared to life, clapping thunder with both hands. "Hold fast!" sailors cried, but the ship cracked like a stick, and the prince was swept overboard into the black. Without a second thought, the Little Mermaid dove. She pushed through raging water and found him sinking, eyes closed, hair floating like seaweed. She wrapped her arms around him and rose, cradling his head above the waves, letting the sea carry them where it would. At dawn, the storm fell asleep. A shore appeared, pale sand, a quiet temple, green gardens singing with birds. The Little Mermaid lifted the prince onto the beach, brushed the hair from his brow, and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead, a kiss full of brave little wishes. Bells rang at the temple. A maiden in white walked toward them, and as the prince stirred and opened his eyes, it was her face he saw first. The Little Mermaid slipped back into the sea before anyone could glimpse the girl who had fought a storm for a stranger. Her heart ached, but it glowed too, because he was safe. After that, she could not forget him. She swam up each day to the rocks near his castle and watched him walk among the rose bushes or race his horse along the shore. She learned the shape of his laughter. She learned the way his eyes searched the horizon, as if he, too, were listening for a song. One evening, she turned to her grandmother. "Do humans truly live forever in their souls?" "Yes," the old queen said softly. "We merfolk have long lives, bright and deep. But when we end, we become foam and sparkle away. Humans have souls that rise like starlight and do not fade." The little mermaid's hope fluttered like a tiny fish. "Even if it hurts, I want to try." "Nonsense," said her grandmother, then paused. "But if you must dream, at least dress properly. Tonight we hold a grand ball." The palace glowed brighter than ever. A clear stream ran through the ballroom so merfolk could dance in pairs. Seahorses blew bubbles shaped like hearts. The little mermaid was called forward to sing, and when she opened her mouth, the whole sea hushed. Her voice was as clear as a bell and as tender as a tide. For a moment, she felt light and proud. Then, far above, she heard a trumpet on the wind, the prince's ship setting sail. "I will be brave," she decided. "I will venture everything." So, while the court swirled in ribbons and laughter, she swam away into darker water where no dance music could reach. She swam past sleepy volcano vents and forests of kelp that curled like old maps. At the very edge of the sea, where bones glowed dimly and sea snakes tied themselves into nervous knots, a cave held the sea witch. The sea witch was not as frightening as the stories, but she wasn't exactly cozy. She had a laugh like a rolling pebble and eyes that noticed everything. "I know why you're here," she said, stirring a cauldron that smelled like thunder. "You love a prince, and you want a human soul. I can help. Drink this potion, and your tail will split into 2 legs. You'll walk as neatly as a ballerina on a music box. But there is a cost." "I'm listening," said the little mermaid, standing as tall as one can under a stalactite. "Once you become human, you can never return to the sea," said the witch. "If the prince loves you best and marries you, your soul will shine with his, and you will gain what you seek. If he marries another, then at dawn your life will end, and you will become foam upon the waves." The little mermaid swallowed. "And the other cost?" "Your voice," said the witch, holding up a small shell. "You'll give it to me. Words can be heavy things, and your voice is the finest I've heard. But you have your courage, your kindness, and your eyes, which speak more than singing." The little mermaid's heart thumped like a drum. "I will do it." The sea witch nodded, surprised but pleased. "At least you read the fine print." She captured the song from the little mermaid's throat and sealed it into the shell with a kiss like a spark. Then she handed over the potion. Just before sunrise, the little mermaid swam to The sea witch nodded, surprised but pleased. "At least you read the fine print." She captured the song from the little mermaid's throat and sealed it into the shell with a kiss like a spark. Then she handed over the potion. Just before sunrise, the little mermaid swam to shore, drank, and the world spun like a giant wheel. There was pain, sharp and bright, like stepping into brand new shoes that pinch and sparkle at the same time. When the sky turned pink, she opened her eyes. Legs, toes, sand, air, and the prince. He found her there, cloaked in dawn light. "Are you all right?" he asked, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "Who are you?" She could not answer, but she smiled with a courage that made him blink. He brought her to the castle and gave her rooms full of sunshine. She learned to walk. She learned to dance. Every step felt like walking over scattered shells, but she lifted her chin and twirled anyway, because hope can be stronger than hurt. The prince grew fond of her gentle way and the bright questions in her eyes. He told her stories about the sea, about the storm, about the maiden from the temple he believed had saved him. The little mermaid listened with a steady heart and a secret that pressed warm against her ribs, like a pearl waiting to be named. One day, the king and queen said, "It is time to meet the princess of a neighboring kingdom." "I will go," said the prince, and to the little mermaid he added, "My heart is already promised. I could never love another as I love the girl from the temple." They sailed across sunlit water. When they reached the other shore, the princess stepped forward. To the little mermaid's astonishment, it was the very maiden from the temple, the kind-eyed girl who had found the prince on the sand. The prince believed his destiny had walked out to meet him. The little mermaid stood tall, though something inside her fluttered like a leaf in the wind. "My friend," he said softly that night, "you will be glad for me, won't you? I must honor the one who saved me." She nodded and smiled with all the gentleness in her, even as the words felt like shadows moving across her heart. The ships were decked with banners for the journey back. A wedding would be held in 7 days. The sea carried them home as stars blinked bravely overhead. That night, as the boat whispered through the dark water, the little mermaid's sisters rose from the waves. Their long hair, oh, their pride, had been cut short, and sea foam clung like tears to their cheeks. "Sister," they called, voices woven with love and urgency. "We gave our hair to the sea witch for a chance to save you. She gave us this." They placed a slender knife in her hands. It gleamed like moonlight. "Before dawn," one sister said, "touch the prince's heart with this blade, and the spell will break. You will be free. You will return to us." The little mermaid stared at the knife, then at the sleeping ship, then at the tender line where sea met sky. Her hands trembled. Her heart did not. "No," she whispered, setting the blade down gently. "I will not buy my life with harm. If I must become Falm, I will do it loving him, not hurting him." She kissed each sister's forehead. The sea folded them away. Then she stepped lightly into the prince's cabin. He lay sleeping, peaceful as a harbor. She knelt and brushed a kiss across his brow, a farewell so soft it could have been a dream. His eyes opened. For a breath, confusion flickered. Then his gaze filled with astonishment, recognition bright as sunrise. "It was you," he said, voice hushed, "not the maiden of the temple. You pulled me from the storm. Those eyes, I remember them from the waves." Joy and sorrow washed through her like the tide. She touched her throat, unable to speak. "Forgive me," he whispered. "My heart knew you, even when my mind did not. I love you, not out of gratitude, but because something in me has been yours all along. Will you be my bride?" Her tears shone like pearls, and she nodded. At dawn, the ships reached the princess's kingdom. The prince went before the temple maiden and told her the truth about the storm and the memory that had returned to him like a tide. He spoke with honesty and respect. The maiden listened with a steady grace. Then she smiled, a little ruefully, a lot kindly, and bowed. "The sea brought you back to the one meant for you. Love is not a prize, it is a path. Go to her. I wish you joy." And so, with flags streaming and gulls wheeling, the ships turned and sailed home again. Bells rang out from the prince's city. Flowers hung from windows like bright laughter. The little mermaid walked beside the prince in white, her steps light, her pain gone like mist. With every vow she spoke in quiet, shining words, she felt warmth bloom in her chest. It was the feeling she had longed for since her garden days, an immortal soul waking like a star. Down in the deep, the Sea King's palace glimmered. The old grandmother wiped her eyes and pretended it was a trick of the brine. The sisters rose in the waves and sang a song of gladness that braided sea and sky together. Even the sea witch, somewhere in her cave, smiled a small, surprised smile and put the Little Mermaid's voice shell back on a high shelf, an old story finished well. From that day forward, the Little Mermaid and her prince lived with kindness at the helm. She planted red flowers in the castle gardens like those she had left below. He kept a room full of maps and star charts so they could always plan another adventure. Sometimes, on bright mornings, they stood at the shore and listened to the water singing, and the water seemed to listen back. When children asked for a lesson, the Little Mermaid would say, "Be brave, be gentle, and keep believing in the good you cannot yet see. Sometimes the hardest choice is the kind one, and that is the magic that changes everything." Their love was as wide as the ocean and as steady as the tide, and their souls, having found each other, shone together for all their days and all the days after. And if you listen, you can still hear the sea telling their story about courage and forgiveness and a wish so true it learned to breathe air and walk on two legs. And that is how the Little Mermaid found not just a prince, but her own bright forever.